The impression she had produced upon the company seemed electrical, but the effect upon myself was something even more. I know not how adequately to describe it. It arose in part, no doubt, from the sentiment of love with which I was imbued, but chiefly from my conviction of the extreme sensibility of the singer. It is beyond the reach of art to endow either art or recitative with more impassioned expression than was hers. Her utterance of the romance in Othello, the tone with which she gave the words sul mio sasso in the Capuletti, is ringing in my memory yet. Her lower tones were absolutely miraculous. Her voice embraced 3 complete octaves, extending from the contralto D to the D upper soprano, and though sufficiently powerful to have filled the San Carlos, executed with the minutest precision, every difficulty of vocal composition, ascending and descending scales, cadences, or furiatori. In the finale of the Somnambula, she brought about a most remarkable effect of the words, non quinge umon pensario, al contento on io son piano. Here, in imitation of Malibran, she modified the original phrase of Bellini so as to let her voice descend to the tenor G, when by a rapid transition she struck the G above the treble stave, springing over an interval of 2 octaves. Upon rising from the piano after these miracles of vocal execution, she resumed her seat by my side, when I expressed to her, in terms of the deepest enthusiasm, my delight at her performance. Of my surprise, I said nothing. And yet I was most unfeignedly surprised, for a certain feebleness, or rather a certain tremulous indecision of voice in ordinary conversation, had prepared me to anticipate that in singing she would not acquit herself with any remarkable ability. Our conversation was now long, earnest, uninterrupted, and totally unreserved. She made me relate many of my earlier passages of my life, and listened with breathless attention to every word of the narrative. I concealed nothing, felt that I had a right to conceal nothing from her confiding affection. Encouraged by her candor upon the delicate point of her age, I entered, with perfect frankness, not only into a detail of my many minor vices, but made full confession of those moral and even of those physical infirmities, the disclosure of which, in demanding so much higher a degree of courage, is so much surer an evidence of love. I touched upon my college indiscretions, upon my extravagances, upon my carousals, upon my debts, upon my flirtations. I even went so far as to speak of a slightly hectic cough, with which at one time I had been troubled, of a chronic rheumatism, of a twinge of a hereditary gout, and in conclusion of the disagreeable and inconvenient but hitherto carefully concealed weakness in my eyes. Upon this latter point, said Madame Lalande laughingly, you have been surely injudicious in coming to confession, for without the confession I take it for granted that no one would have accused you of the crime. By the by, she continued, have you any recollection? And here I fancied that a blush, even through the gloom of the apartment, became distinctly visible upon her cheek. Have you any recollection, mon cher ami, of this little ocular assistant which now depends upon my neck? As she spoke, she twirled her fingers in the identical double eyeglass which had so overwhelmed me with the confusion of the opera. Full well, alas, do I remember it, I exclaimed, pressing passionately the delicate hand which offered the glasses for my inspection. They formed a complex and magnificent toy, richly chased and filigreed, and gleaming with jewels, which even in the deficient light I could not help perceiving were of high value. "Ah bien, mon ami," she resumed with a certain empressement of manner that rather surprised me. "Ah bien, mon ami, you have earnestly besought of me a favor which you have been pleased to denominate priceless. You have demanded of me my hand upon the morrow. Should I yield to your entreaties, and may I add to the pleadings of my own bosom, would I not be entitled to demand of you a very little boon in return?" "Name it," I exclaimed with an energy that nearly drawn upon us as the observation of the company, and restrained by their presence alone, yet throwing myself impetuously at her feet. "Name it, my beloved, my Eugenie, my own. Name it, but alas, it is already yielded ere named." "You shall conquer then, mon ami," she said, "for the sake of the Eugenie whom you love, this little weakness which you have last confessed. This weakness more moral than physical, and which, let me assure you, is so unbecoming the nobility of your real nature, so inconsistent with the candor of your usual character, and which, if permitted further control, will assuredly involve you, sooner or later, in some very disagreeable scrape. You shall conquer for my sake is affectation that leads you, as you yourself acknowledge, for the tacit or implied denial of your infirmity of vision. For this infirmity you virtually deny, in refusing to employ the customary means for its relief. You will understand me then to say that I wish you to wear spectacles? Ah, hush! You have already consented to wear them for my sake. You shall accept the little toy which I now hold in my hand, and which, though admirable as an aid to vision, is really of no immense value as a gem. You perceive that by a trifling modification thus, it can be adapted to the eyes in the form of spectacles, or one in the waistcoat pocket as an eyeglass. It is in the former mode, however, and habitually, that you have already consented to wear it for my sake. This request, must I confess it, confused me in no little degree, but the condition with which I was coupled rendered hesitation, of course, a matter altogether out of the question. "It is done," I cried with all the enthusiasm that I could muster at the moment. "It is done. It is most cheerfully agreed. I sacrifice every feeling for your sake. Tonight I wear this dear eyeglass as an eyeglass, and upon my heart, but with the earliest dawn of that morning which gives me pleasure of calling you my wife, I will place it upon my nose, and there wear it ever afterward in the less romantic and less fashionable, but certainly in the more serviceable form in which you desire." Our conversation now turned upon the details of our arrangement for the morrow. Talbot, I learned from my betrothed, had just arrived in town. I was to see him at once and procure a carriage. This soiree would scarcely break out before 2, and by this hour the vehicle was to be at the door. When, in the confusion occasioned by the departure of the company, Madame L. could easily enter it unobserved, we were then to call at the house of the clergyman who would be in waiting, there to be married, drop Talbot, and proceed on a short tour to the east, leaving the fashionable world at home to make whatever comments upon the matter I thought best. Our conversation now turned upon the details of the arrangement for the morrow. Having planned all this, I immediately took leave and went in search of the Talbot. But on the way, I could not refrain from stepping into a hotel for the purpose of inspecting a miniature. And by this I did by the powerful aid of the glasses. The countenance was a surpassingly beautiful one. Those large, luminous eyes, that proud Grecian nose, those dark, luxuriant curls. Ah, said I exultingly to myself, this is indeed the speaking image of my beloved. I turned to the reverse and discovered the words, Eugene Lalande, aged 27 years and 7 months. I found Talbot at home, and proceeded at once to acquaint him with my good fortune. He professed excessive astonishment, of course, but congratulated to me most cordially, but proffered every assistance in his power. In a word, we carried out our arrangement to the letter, and at 2 in the morning, just 10 minutes after the ceremony,